Hello everyone, this is Joe or Ackar Productions and welcome back to another video. Today we'll be taking a look at the official Canon appearance or MOC of Artakha. Now if you aren't familiar with the Canon MOC contests, the popular YouTube channel TTV actually got into contact with the head writer of Bionicle himself, Greg Farshti, and got permission to run contests to determine the visual appearances of many characters throughout the Bionicle canon that never had visual appearances. And this was incredibly exciting to me because there are so many cool characters like Artakha over here who just never had visual appearances in the story, and we learned so much about them throughout the story serials, the chapter books, the guidebooks, and just as Bionicle's story kept getting expanded upon in its later years. So it's really cool to see them. Now the way the contests actually work is they're actually split into two possible parts. The first is a mock contest, and the second is an art contest. Now the second part of the contest is not always run because out of these 15 characters that will eventually be voted on to get a visual appearance, only some of them actually have Kanohi that already exist in the Bionicle canon. For example, Artakha over here, his mask of creation, the Kanohi he wears, did not have a visual appearance in the story. So that's why they have the art portion of the contest, because even though you can build the model and design it however you would like, you can't just build a mask because there are pre-existing masks that have a meaning in the lore, so it wouldn't make sense for them to have that same mask. So once the winner of the mock portion of the contest is determined, the artist can come in and, stay accurate to the rest of the model, but can change the mask to whatever they like if they want to. The mock portion of this contest, he had a different mask, and it was a 3D print from one designed by, I believe, King K. And it did look very cool, but the artist, Perpetual, came in and changed the mask, and I'm a really big fan of how this mask looks. So that's how the contest works. And to give another example of that, a future character that will get a visual appearance is Toa Niriki. It's known in canon that he has a Valatak, which is the same mask that Nuperu wears when he's a Toa Mari. So since that one already appears in the story, there will not be an art portion of the contest. So with all of that out of the way, I do have to give credit to the amazing people that won the contest and helped design this figure. I'm just reviewing it, but I had no say in how this was designed, besides maybe painting the mask, but I'll explain that in a second. So first off, Connor Hoffman was the winner of the mock contest, and like I said, he did use a different mask, but still, this model is absolutely incredible. It's so detailed, it's very accurate, and we'll talk more about that in the actual review, but I'm just so impressed with it, so huge shout out to him. And second is Perpetual. They were the person that drew the art, and technically that is the official canon appearance of Artakha in the Bionicle canon. And that drawing is absolutely fantastic. It's so detailed, it looks even better than professional, and it's really, really cool. And then lastly, the last shout out I want to give is actually to Galva, and that is the person who worked with Perpetual, the designer of this mask of creation, as they're a 3D modelist, and created a 3D model of the mask that Perpetual designed. And that's why I was able to get it, because they posted it on their Shapeways page, and I was able to buy the plastic and then paint it and customize it. So actually in my Collecting Bionicle series, I think maybe episode 4, I show you the process that I went through to paint this, and I go over more detail about the plastic I chose on Shapeways and all of that. So if you are interested in any of that and you want to give great credit to the amazing artists that created this, from the mockist to the artist to the 3D modelist, all those links are in the video description. Also, something really cool is that TTV makes sure that the mockists include instructions and a part list because they want members of the community to be able to rebuild these models. So if you look at the link to the mockist page, you can see that in there are the instructions and the part list and all that stuff, as well as, like I said, everything else is in the video description. Now just to explain a little bit about how I will be reviewing this figure, or as far as my rating scale goes, I'll be using 4 different categories to rate this figure. I thought these were good categories to choose for not only just the Canon MOC contests, as I do see myself reviewing more, but also overall I think this is a great, these are 4 great categories to evaluate a figure over. So the first category I'll be looking at is design. That evaluates how well it resembles the character. It's based off just overall, how does it look? Is it cool? Is it unique? Is it really just a copy of something else? Does it not really stand out within the Bionicle characters? Does it fit the theme? Stuff like that. How does it scale? All stuff like that. Second category is articulation, and that also includes some posability and stability, all that stuff. How easy is the figure to pose? Bionicle they're not just Lego, it's an action figure, so does it pose well? Can it stand up on its own? Does it have a good range of motion to put in those poses? All stuff like that. Third is the build. Again, this is Lego, that's very important. So how exactly is the build process? Do they use a good variety of pieces? Do they have good building techniques? Is it too difficult? And by too difficult, I don't necessarily mean is it too hard, because, you know, I feel like I'm old enough now where something like that won't be too difficult, but more so, is one piece, do you have to bend a piece a certain way to get it on that isn't too natural, and is that kind of hard to do because the piece is too new, or something along those lines? And then lastly, cost, which includes how affordable is this figure, and is it worth the cost? Because you do have to buy all these pieces, and they tend to get expensive, so is it really worth it for the figure, or do all these pieces combined together just not add up to being worth it? So I will give a rating for each of those categories, and then a final rating. It won't be an average, but again, that's kind of to give ballpark about where it sits in each of those categories, because it might be really weak in one category, but all the others may be so good that overall it's still a fantastic figure. So with all that out of the way now, we can finally get into this figure that's sitting right in front of the camera, and that is Artakha. So really quickly, who is Artakha? Well, Artakha was created by the Great Beings. He's a craftsman, and he is most well known for, in the Bionicle canon, for creating the Toa Mata, the original Toa, the ones destined to become the Toa Nuva and save Mata Nui. He created them, and in fact, Perpetual really captured that awesomely, because you see them in canisters in the background, kind of like test tubes, since he just built them. So that looks really cool. So that's what he's known for. He also built their battle vehicles that you see them use in 2008 with the Fantoka, and he's built a couple other things. So he's a really cool guy. I'd love to learn more about him, because even I don't know everything about him, as I'm still just piecing through more of the Bionicle lore, really diving deeper in, reading everything that I never got to back when I was younger. So briefly, that's just a little bit about him, but without further ado, let's get on to the rest of this figure. And here is the craftsman himself, Artakha, the full figure sitting right here. And right off the bat, let's dive right into the design, because he looks very, very intimidating, and he just looks awesome. He's very tall. In fact, I do have a ruler over here, and we're going to take a look. But as you can see, standing up right there, and his knees are kind of bent a little bit. And it's a little hard because I don't want to knock him over, which I'll explain that when we get to that point in a second. But he's just over a foot tall, so just over 12 inches, which is kind of crazy because that is very tall. But that is actually very accurate, because I believe in the official description it says he's about 10 feet tall, very intimidating, very large, and we know that he's green, which we can see he clearly is green, and we know that he wields a hammer and has a very ornate mask. So based upon the description of what we know, he is very accurate, and Connor Hoffman did a fantastic job capturing exactly what we know about Artakha through the textual descriptions. He looks like a Bionicle, and that's something where, and again, maybe I can get into this in a later video, but something that I learned about G2 of Bionicle, which I still do have a soft spot for, because, you know, it was nice to see Bionicle back. But as far as set-wise, because story is a whole different story, the first wave to me just didn't feel so much of biomechanically, and that's what Bionicle should be. You should have that organic robotic mixture, but not so much as a clean robot like something like a Transformer for maybe G1, let's say, but something that looks really organic. You see pistons, almost like wires, and so that's just captured perfectly. You really see, you know, the technic detail that adds to that, and it's just really cool. Also, I'm a really big fan of the design of this hammer. Now, I'm going to very gently, hopefully, take this off, which may or may not work out well. And so just taking a closer look at the hammer, there it is, and I'm a really big fan of this design because it's very unique. You know, you definitely could have went with a different approach and went with something that was more standard and more common to be seen as far as hammer design goes in the Bionicle canon, but Connor really took it to the next level. I love the use of those like Pohatu arm pieces from the Fantoka, just really, really cool. And something that's really funny is that this is the longest Technic axle rod I have ever seen. It is gigantic. That is all one piece. So when I got that, I was very surprised. But again, really cool and unique use of the hammer. I really do like that. Now, while I am zoomed on over here, the last part of the design, and this, of course, all credit goes to Perpetual, and of course, Galva for translating it well to the 3D model, but that is the Mask of Creation, and that thing is just absolutely fantastic. Now, of course, I did paint it, and I am really happy and proud, truly, of how I painted it. It came out a lot better than I thought, but just the base detail of this, and you can see breakdowns in a gallery, actually in the link in the video description, from Perpetual of all the influences on the mask. And it was meant to look very ornate, I know, and ancient with a lot of markings, so it's really cool to see all those, some of the Nuva symbol markings on there, Just very, very cool because, you know, kind of like any artist, they're going to put a little bit of their life in their work. So it's kind of cool how Artakha put symbols from his mask in his work, which, you know, are the Toanuva that he's creating. Overall, it just perfectly captures that feel. And something that I actually mentioned in my Collecting Bionicle episode when I was painting it is that something that I didn't necessarily get from the G2 Mask of Creation, and granted they had different aesthetics, but something that I didn't necessarily get was how the G2 Mask of Creation, and just overall in G2, they had a lot more curvature to their designs. If you look at G1 Bionicle, especially for the legendary Kanohi from the Mask of Time, or the Vahi, to the Ignika or the Mask of Life, and now this, they're very kind of jagged and rough in their design. I think that really fits because they're ancient, they're old, and they just weren't as clean or smooth looking. So for one, the mask is fairly matte, and again, that's kind of painting, but that kind of fits with the theme of Bionicle G1, and it's just very jagged. Like, if you think back to the Ignika, where Matanui, you know, the symbol of his body on the mask there, that's a very jagged part of the mask, and it really works. So that's why, like, I am a really big fan. I do think that this does fit best for Artakha. And I am a really big fan of King K's work. I've seen all his stuff on Shapeways. It's incredible. I love his movie accurate designs of, like, the Turaga Duma mask and a few others and all that. So really cool stuff from him, but I'm just a really big fan of this Mask of Creation as well. So while we're here, I'll do one more pan down to look at the design. Again, very cool. Not going to move him too much because, again, I will get into that in the next section. But just very detailed, as you can see. He looks absolutely awesome. I will actually do a 360 because it'll be perfect, and also so you should see the back. And something that was mentioned a lot, actually, was that, or at least I saw a few people mention it, that the cape was maybe too small, or at least it looked better in Perpetual's art because it was a lot longer, but honestly I'm fine with it. These back Takanuva pieces here kind of serve as like a bottom of the cape, and it kind of makes sense a little bit because maybe it's armored or something like that. And also something that I didn't mention, but these hands are really cool and unique. I love the kind of you know, like finger-like design there with them. It's really unique, and again, we've had that done before with Axon, so it's good to see another unique design of it. So overall, fantastic design here. I mean, there's pretty much no flaws in it. I think it perfectly captured him. He's very tall, he's very big, exactly how Artakha should be, exactly how we know it. And when I first saw that, that's why I actually got him before I got Helrix, you know, the first one in the Canon MOC contest, because I was blown away. I said, that looks like an incredible Bionicle. It looks like one of those old Titan sets, like the Takanuvas we got, even Toa Matanui, which is very controversial, but, you know, it's very... it's a big, awesome set, and it's really fun to build. So honestly, I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10 for the design. I don't think I would ever go for a 10 out of 10 just because you don't want to set the bar as perfect, because what's better than perfect, and what happens if you ever get something better, kind of like that whole philosophy. And I think 9 is a very good score. The only thing I would take off for it, as I mentioned, is, or at least maybe I didn't elaborate too much, well, for one, the small cape. I do think having it a little bit better could have been a little cooler because, as we saw in the art, it just looks better. And also kind of the point about the mask, and again, this is nothing against the model, just because Connor Hoffman did not design it with the intention of this mask in mind, kind of a smoother one that was used by King K. But I do think it could have been a little more, maybe sharp edges at the top, at the shoulders. He is a smoother figure than we're used to seeing, especially for Titan scaled, I'd say, or like bigger scaled for Bionicle. So I do think it could have been a little less smooth, and then I think the mask could have fit a little bit better. But again, these are such minor nitpicks. A 9 out of 10 is a fantastic score. I don't even know how you can get higher than that. It's a really good figure. And also, even though technically it is a different category, and I'll get to that, but a little bit of the design I feel like I could subtract from, even though that's mostly visual. I do think that I could take off a little bit because its stability isn't the best, and I do think that that does factor a little bit into design, or it has to be taken into a little bit of consideration, because if something looks really good but you can't move it, that's an issue. So I'll explain more of that. So that's why I think that a 9 is a fair score for it, where it can't be something higher than that because of those small issues. But again, absolutely fantastic, phenomenal job Connor, and fantastic job to Perpetual and Galva for the incredible mask design. So let's move on now to the articulation. Now I know I just spent a lot of time on the design, but rightfully so. I mean, that is what most people first see when they look at this figure, and that's why a lot of people love it, so I have to give the credit there. Now I am going to remove the hammer just for this segment here because I do want to showcase the articulation, and I promise I'll try to go over these sections a little bit quicker. So first off, as far as what articulation he does have a lot of motion. You can actually move up the shoulders, which is really cool. Again, that just helps with greater posability. The head is on the full swivel. You can't lift it up too much because of the headstock in the back, but that's still pretty good, I think, and that's honestly probably more than enough that you need. Mostly, it could go down pretty far. Again, it is a big mask. Left to right is as you would expect. The arms can move all the way up here. Then of course you have articulation at the actual elbow joints, and of course you have finger articulation and wrist articulation. Now, as far as the back of the figure, really quickly, just flipping that cape up, you do have articulation with these back kind of bottom armor pieces of the cape, which is really cool. Throwing that down there. You of course have articulation in the legs, at the knees, and with the feet. So all the expected places. Now, where this figure suffers the most, and I think where most people will see issues with him that you don't see when you look at him online, and as to why he's always leaning against the back, is that he is not the most stable figure. And honestly, to a benefit to Connor, all the pieces, because a lot of times when you would get a big set in Bionicle, a lot of the pieces would flap off. None of that happens. Everything is very secure, like literally everything, which is really impressive. Like none of these smaller pieces, even these Lego system studs fall off. It's really impressive. But the issue stems from that it's a really heavy figure. Like this is a big guy. Like I said, he's 12 inches. There's a lot of Lego here. So if you just try to stand him up or do some things like that, and of course now he's staying, but if you even try to slightly pose him differently, especially with the hammer because it offsets, his knees cannot support the weight most of the time. Or if you're doing something like this, you want to put him in like a different pose, he just kind of folds up like that. If you get him in there like that, he kind of stays, but again, that's the best you can do. And once you put the hammer on, he just really folds up. Now I do have a solution for it, and I will share it in a second, but really quickly touching the other points here. Like I said, great range of motion. He does pose well when you could get him into a pose. I mean, that's partially because of the design. He's just a really cool design. And it does stay together very well. But again, the issue is he just can't support himself well. He's just not the most stable guy. But as you know, the CCBS building system introduced these amazing friction pieces, which were very useful. Now, even though I don't want to, overwrite what Connor did for the MOC here or anything like that, but you could put these at the joints, and I did try them out, and I will show you guys how it works, and I'm still debating on whether or not I will keep him like this in my collection, just because I'm going to want to display him, and truly, especially when you put the hammer in, he just can't really stay up too well. So I did try out these pieces, and again, I will put these on for you guys to see, and it actually helped a lot. Now, it's still not perfect, but I was able to get him into a really cool pose with the hammer that I could not have gotten if it wasn't for these. And I do have quite a few of these, but I don't want to take them off my G2 Bionicle, so this is just from Hero Factory stuff that I had. So I have about 6 here, I think. So I did one for the knee, one for the foot, same thing for the other leg. Actually, these ball joints here are pretty stable at the hips. And then I did one for the shoulder and one for the elbow, and the hand one's pretty good, so it probably could be better, but I don't want to make the arm too long. So as you can see, there's Artakha, and even though it's not perfect, it was definitely still a little difficult to pose. I still had to balance him. That pose just could not have worked because the hammer would have been weighing him down. And again, there's no actual friction joints on this left arm here, but again, that was fine without the hammer. So it does help. It does make him a little bit longer, as you can see. There's a little more space between there, but honestly, I don't think that's that bad. I'm still debating on whether or not I want to keep him in there, just because it is taking away a little bit from the model. But honestly, it still looks really good to me. Maybe I can even zoom in there. You can see a little bit better of the detail of what exactly he's doing. Just has his hand outstretched there with the hammer up. So, and he's not balancing against the wall. That's just him purely balancing, classically, as you would expect for a figure when you get him into a pose. So I'm going to go with a 6.5 for the articulation. I know that may seem a little low, but honestly, everything else is very good, but that's a huge detriment, I think, when it just can't be stable. But that shouldn't take away from the incredible design so far. And that's something to consider, maybe even working the friction joints more into the model for the future. But still, it's still very good. Like I said, very impressed with how the pieces stay on. And this is a pretty easy fix. So I think a 6.5 is very fair. Still good, but definitely could be improved upon in the future. As far as the third category, the build, there was a lot of really cool techniques that I honestly, I mean, I'm not really a good mockist at all, but they were absolutely incredible, some of these techniques. And I mean, I'm just gonna kind of move the camera up here so you can see. But if we look up to here, you can see there's just so many little pieces that are being put in, from the stud piece over up here. The actual silver Technic ball is put in there to give detail, and it sits kind of between the actual Takanuva piece. There's system pieces at the front of his chest. Like I mentioned before, with these hand pieces were very unique. Trying to think more going down here. I mean, integrating CCBS, that's something that is a lot harder than you think to integrate, and it just goes perfectly. These feet design were really cool. Definitely could have went with a simple route and just gave us those kind of cool feet that I think were on the Evo machine from Hero Factory, maybe even before, but they're completely expanded upon. So just very impressive, very good build, a great piece variety, like I said, from Ben 10, Technic, CCBS, Bionicle. The only detriment I will say is that a few of the techniques were definitely not LEGO certified, and granted, you know, this doesn't have to be, and maybe that contributes to its instability, maybe. But I'm talking like stuff like up here, even though it's really cool and it's an interesting technique, kind of putting a little bushing or Technic piece in between kind of that ball joint part isn't really something that I don't think is necessary. I know it's probably to cover up all the gaps, but I do think those gaps make it look kind of naturally like a biomechanical figure, so I don't think it's too bad to have those gaps there. But it looked like kind of wanted to cover up every single part to make sure there was no holes or anything like that. The V's on heads down there were definitely very awkward to get on and very hard. They're definitely stretching a little bit, but I don't really care because that's, you know, I'm using those pieces for this. But just something to point out. I think even with all that considered, it's still very good. I'm definitely going to go with an 8.5 because just with a build like this, you just can't make something this impressive without using great techniques. So I'm not even going to really take away points too much for that. 8.5. And then lastly, the cost. And this one is very difficult because, as I said, this guy was kind of expensive. You know, it's something to consider. You're going to have to invest money into this thing no matter how rich you are because, I mean, it's a lot of money for one figure when you can definitely get a bunch of old Bionicles for the same price. I think I mentioned before, overall about 420 for me, and that's including the custom mask. That's steep. That really is steep. That's a lot there. But the thing is, this guy is just, he is so good. He is so unique. It's a big set, so it's going to cost a lot of money. But still, 420 is expensive no matter what the figure is. And it is because of some of the pieces, they want it in specific colors. I don't want to screw up anything because I wasn't familiar with the model. So I got all of those. There was a lot of gray Technic pins and stuff like that that are a lot more rare to get. So they were pretty expensive. That's just one thing I can think of. So I'm probably going to go with a 7 for the cost. If this figure was maybe like $100 less, I would give it a higher rating. And again, that's really nothing to do with the designer. They're just making the MOC. But just for you, if you want to get this figure, it is very good, but it's also very expensive. And you know, maybe in the future you can get a couple of the custom MOCs for just the price of this one. So, and it was only 691 pieces, I believe. And again, with all the calculations still, it's you wouldn't be paying this much for a new set. So that's something to consider. There are a lot of rare pieces used. But again, that's not really too much of the figure's fault. And it's really not too bad, but I do think considering, you know, economics and pricing is important when determining whether or not you want to get this figure, because it is expensive. Like I said, I'm not going to average those together, but overall, what do I think about this figure? I mean, like I keep saying, this guy is absolutely incredible. Yeah, it's expensive. Yeah, he's not the most stable, but there's a pretty easy fix for that. And of course, as with anything, if you save up for it and you really want something, it's going to be so worth it when you finally get everything in the mail. And I mean, this guy's absolutely incredible. The mask, everything, it just feels so Bionicle, and it's so cool to get someone this important / unique in the Bionicle canon finally in a visual form. Getting that final legendary mask of power is just absolutely incredible. One of the legendary Kanohi. It's so cool to have it now alongside the Vahi and the Ignika. And that's why my final score is going to be a 9 out of 10. I mean, again, it's absolutely incredible. I probably said that so many times. Amazing design. Really interesting build techniques used here. And it's just such a cool figure. And that's why, I mean, and again, I can't stress enough, the design is so cool, it looks so good, even better in person, the colors mix so well, the gold mask, the mask itself is incredible, the cool hammer, everything, and its sheer size, its accuracy, it's so worth it. I'm so happy that, you know, Connor designed this, Perpetual enhanced it with the mask and the art, and then Galva was able to give us a 3D model so we can take this mask home for ourselves, so really, really excited. to see more of what these contests bring. I did start with Artakha. I do actually have the mask of Helrix, but that will probably be coming up sometime soon. But I do plan on reviewing all of these. Hopefully this review wasn't too long. It was so exciting, and I'm a little bit rusty at my reviews. Haven't done them in years, so hopefully it wasn't too bad. I'll try to edit it down where I could. But definitely thank you so much for watching, and definitely stay tuned to this channel for more Bionicle content. Collecting Bionicle is a series I run where it just follows me collecting everything in Bionicle. That's why the mask was included in there, since now this is something that I have to collect in Bionicle, and I show how I paint that. I also do have Bionicle Explained, which I will get back to eventually, and of course, probably what I am most well known for on my channel is my stop motion stuff, so definitely check that stuff out. I haven't done a Bionicle one in a while, but I do have a bunch of other cool LEGO stuff I do with it. So, again, thank you for watching. Definitely stay tuned for more. But with that, I will talk to you guys later.